Hello. Do you ever feel apprehensive about starting a novel because of some element you've heard about its story, no matter how acclaimed the book is? I definitely felt that before I began reading debut novel Western Lane by Chetna Maroo, because all I knew about this story was that it centers around a girl who plays squash. And because I have zero interest in sports, I wasn't sure how I might connect with this novel. But once I began reading it, I got really into this tale, which has a beautiful quietness to it. Beneath the surface action, there's a lot of subtle power which arises through finely crafted descriptions of this family's life. It gradually shows how there are silences which grow between family members until they become monumental. At the beginning, narrator Gopi informs us that she was 11 years old when her mother died, and we follow the aftermath of her loss. She's left with her two older sisters and her brooding father living in a town on the outskirts of London. Instead of dealing with or discussing their grief, the father trains his girls to play squash in a sports center called Western Lane, and he says to them that I want you to become interested in something you can do your whole life. In other words, this is an activity that can potentially stave off the void that's been created because of the loss of their mother. Gopi develops a passion and a talent for playing, which her pa fosters leading up to a local tournament. And she spends so much time refining her technique, playing in this empty box of the squash court, repeatedly hitting a ball against the wall. It turns into a space which has a timeless quality to it where neither her own adolescent development or the loss of her mother matters. The story traces this period, showing how no matter how much we'd like to remain suspended in the present moment, change is inevitable. This becomes apparent through gradual shifts which occur in the family's routines between work, school, and home life. Their restrained interactions are charged with an aching sorrow because of the loss of Gopi's ma and all of the emotions that they're suppressing. What her sisters and father are truly feeling is only revealed in brief moments of overheard conversations or uncharacteristic behavior. At the same time, the prospect of Gopi's own displacement becomes more probable as her aunt and uncle offer to take her into their own home to relieve her father of the burden of raising three girls on his own. It's heartrending following Gopi's lonely journey as she becomes more and more disciplined in her training, while the conspicuous absence within her family grows. I admire Maroo's pared down narrative style, which builds precise details of action and dialogue to present this intricate portrait of Gopi's world. As time moves on and their lives necessarily progress without Ma, there are reminders that she's gone. Gopi attends a Gujarati school in addition to her English education, and this was her mother's primary language that she spoke because she didn't speak English very well. There are moments when one sister still tries to speak to their ma using this language, or when their pa seems to see their mother in a living room chair. While each member of the family mourns in their own way, their uncle and aunt and the Gujarati community hurriedly move in to provide instruction for these motherless girls and to fill their kitchen with food. The narrative gracefully moves between these very tender moments of private family life and more public demonstrations as functioning as a unit. While it's definitely a melancholy story, there's also a lot of warmth and joy to it. The sisters share this close physical bond. They often climb into each other's beds, but they all have distinct personalities. There's also a sweetness to how adolescent Gopi invests so much energy and focus in the lead up to this tournament, which we know in 10 or even 5 years' time, the results of this won't matter because she'll have grown and moved beyond it. So it reminded me of that adolescent experience where you become so focused on one event and moving towards that event. But then later, when you think back on it, you're like, why did this matter so much to me? It's also a story of an immigrant family and community in Britain who still have ties between India, Kenya, and Pakistan. While there are subtle tensions which arise from this, such as when Gopi and Pa develop close relationships with a white woman and her son Jed at Western Lane, it's not dramatized for the sake of the plot. It's simply there in the background as part of their lives, and I appreciate how this is presented so naturally. Though the family possesses a strong sense of self through their place in the community, there's still an ambivalence about how to interact with each other given the enormity of the loss that they've sustained. Equally, Gopi is so uncertain in how to openly communicate with Jed, even though there are strong feelings between them. And she comments that we were shy and afraid because there was all this feeling between us and we didn't know who we were. It's beautiful how moments like this capture all the awkwardness of adolescence where so many emotions are present but can't be adequately expressed. At the beginning of the novel, her sister Kush assures Gopi that things are going to be okay, and we know this is true despite the possibility that depression might overwhelm them. But it's very touching how this novel shows the way that their Ma's absence will always be a part of their lives, but it won't be the main thing that determines their future. I imagine some readers might grow impatient with this novel or feel like its plot is too slight, but I was very moved by the gentleness of its story. I think we need more fiction which has this great gentle quality to it. And speaking of that, it's interesting that Chetna Maroo worked alongside author Thomas Morris in the Stinging Flies workshop program. So the Stinging Fly is a literary publication in Dublin, and Thomas Morris is an interesting writer that also writes contemporary fiction that evokes a lot of subtle emotion. So if you enjoyed Western Lane, I would recommend reading some of Thomas Morris's short fiction. So there's his collection, We Don't Know What We're Doing, but also his upcoming publication called Open Up, and this is a collection of short stories as well. But overall, I felt like Western Lane is a very promising debut. I really enjoyed reading it, and I hope Maroo writes more. So I'd love to know if you've read this novel and what you think about it. Do you agree with me? Did you enjoy the elements of the story? Was there too much squash in it for you? How did you feel about it? Or are you interested in reading it now? Please let me know what you think in the comments below. But I hope you're doing well and reading good things. I'll speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.